Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Jonathan Edwards.
And welcome back to all of you. That's the first time we've been introduced as a panel with dancing, so thank you very much for that. This is my final panel session. It's the final session of this Doha Goals 2014. We're looking at sports leaders as champions in society, both sports stars. There's two aspects to this, the sports stars themselves and also the sports institutions. Let me introduce a very distinguished panel to you. To my left, Ivan Bravo, needs a little introduction, the Director General of the Aspire Academy here in Qatar, and at Real Madrid before that. We've got Len KOMOROSKI, the CEO of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who's delighted to have LeBron James back in the team. Yeah, very popular. Marc, President and founder of the Giving Back Fund in the USA, which leverages celebrity for good causes. And Wasserman, founder and chairman and CEO of the Wasserman Media Group, one of the world's leading sports agencies. Now, let me first of all, I'm going to start with you, Marc, because if people look at your bio, you're perhaps the least qualified person to be up here in terms of your sporting credentials. But you had a very famous coach, didn't you, when you were at Chicago? Tell us about him.
Well, more like a tutor. I ran track and played basketball at the University of Chicago, and our track coach happened to be the United States, one of the United States Olympic track coaches, and he introduced me to a gentleman who happened to live nearby on campus, named Jesse Owens. And I am from Cleveland, proudly, and Jesse Owens happens to be from Cleveland, and so I was fortunate to become friends with Jesse, and he invited me to his apartment and showed me his 4 gold medals from the 38 Olympics, and then came and tutored me in the long jump. And I'll tell you something about that. As long as this isn't being taped, then no one's going to repeat this. But I was 18 at the time. He was 65, and I think he was still able to long jump farther than me.
Long jump farther than you. We're going to talk about sports leaders in society, and was there a greater one than Jesse Owens in many respects before his time when we were talking about role models?
No, he was a true American icon. One of the most principled and decent men of any athlete I've ever known. It was an honor to know him, and he will go down in history as one of the greatest athletes of all time.
So these days, we just accept that successful sportsmen and sportswomen are role models. It's not something you opt into, it's just part of the territory. But the initial question I'm going to ask the panel is if this is an acceptable view. Is it right to view sportsmen and sportswomen like that? Is it their responsibility? But what I also want to hear from is some of the students. So once we've heard from the panel members, I want to hear from about 5 students. Okay, so not all from the same institution, just to how you view sportsmen and women, what you expect from them. Do you expect a different level of morality? Do you expect them to show you how to live? So it'll be very interesting to hear from you, because when we talk about role models, it's particularly aimed at young people, and we don't want to be patronizing as old people, frankly, up here on the stage, telling you what we think sportsmen and women would be. Casey, you work with some of the greatest sportsmen and women in the world. What's your view on this?
Well, I think what's really interesting about the issue around athletes being a role model is 15 years ago or 20 years ago, there was the famous Charles Barkley ad by Nike where it was cool to say, I'm not a role model. And clearly the tide, as you said, has turned and the pendulum has swung, frankly, further the other way than sort of a fair center ground. And I think it comes with the territory. One, the athletes are getting the benefit of the platforms that they compete on, the money associated with that. Most of the ones who you would expect to be role models are choosing to engage in social media in a way that exposes them to the world in a pretty meaningful way. And I think it's naive of an athlete to think that they won't be viewed as a role model. If they don't want to operate in that way, that's their entitlement. But I think athletes should expect to be and ought to be excited to be role models because they can serve a really meaningful role. It's obviously the topic of this panel. And in this day and age, I'm not sure they really have a choice.
Okay. Marc, I mean, you've made a living now out of persuading celebrities and sportsmen and women to give back, haven't you? What's your view?
Well, I think that just as no one is obligated to make philanthropic gifts, no one's obligated to be a role model. But I think when you're an athlete, you have an opportunity. When you're famous, fame in and of itself has no intrinsic value. It'll bring you wealth, but it gives you a platform. And the platform of fame you can take and use for something very important. You can take the spotlight that's on you as an athlete, and turn it on a cause, turn it on something that truly is important. And I think athletes have that opportunity, and it's a tremendous opportunity.
Just to build off that really well-stated answers from both Mark and Casey, I can remember we talk about platforms. It wasn't that long ago when ESPN was launched as a network, and the question was it going to make it or not? And when you think about the explosion now in the platform itself, it's become stunning. And the appetite for sports and entertainment is only going to continue to grow. And so with that platform, that spotlight, and also that responsibility, whether you like it or not, is going to be there. Because, as it pertains to that, the prevalence of these athletes, and then ultimately I would translate that to organizations, whether it be our franchise or others, and the role that we have to play in our respective communities and the leadership that is expected. I think ultimately we look at that as a privilege, and I think a lot of it speaks to the character of your players as well. And I think the good news is what we're seeing is players are recognizing that. They recognize that they have a special direct relationship with fans. Certainly social media has placed a great amount of emphasis on that, and will only continue to expand on that as we go forward. So this is something I think, as far as the dialogue, as Casey talked about, I don't know if there's any choice, and the spotlight is only going to continue to get brighter and bigger as we move forward. Yvonne?
I think I would just add a little bit to what everybody else is saying on the panel. They have the responsibility. They are under the spotlight. Not everybody has just the personality or the desire or the I would say the ability to actually be at the forefront, to be on the stage, to run foundations, to be a leader in the community. What you would expect from all of them, though, is that they would have just a personal conduct that was respectful, that was generous, that was good people. And what we tell our young kids here, who hopefully one day will be champions in the sport, is that those are the values we want them to have. So we're just as happy when they go to a tournament and they win a championship, or they don't win, but we hear from the tournament, your boys were amazing. Their behavior, how polite they were, what their team spirit was. So if you get those early habits into the young aspiring champions, when they become the LeBron Jameses of the world and the big names and celebrities, they will also most likely have that kind of conduct. I'll give you a very quick couple of examples. We have the privilege of having one of the greatest football players of all time in Spain, Raúl, 16 years at Real Madrid, leading scorer in Champions League history, Real Madrid history. And it's not about him being here today and greeting everybody and just talking about foundation work. It's about the amount of time he's spent with our children, training with them, and setting the example of what a good professional on and off the pitch is. And that is the type of character that we're hoping to build for them for the future.
I'm going to come to the students in just 1 second, but I just want to sort of counter that a little bit. My youngest son loves football. He's a massive Liverpool fan. I know, Casey, you look after Steven Gerrard. He loves Stevie G. 3 footballers that he has massive respect for. Suarez, you wouldn't call a great role model. Zidane at Real Madrid, he let himself down on the biggest day of his life, a World Cup final. And also, going back a way, Eric Cantona. I mean, he kung fu kicked a spectator as he was being sent off. And yet all of these people, they're still heroes, Casey.
They can still be heroes, but that doesn't mean they're role models. And I think they were heroes to your son because of what they did on the pitch in a competitive setting, probably not because he aspired to be like them in their conduct. And frankly, in this day and age, if more conduct was more exposed to more kids, I think they'd be less likely to be role models and heroes. I think, athletes are more prominent now than they ever have been. You take the way LeBron handled his going back to Cleveland, and you look at how different that was to when he left Cleveland. There's no question. Part of that decision was because he understood very clearly now that he was a role model and needed to behave and conduct himself in a certain way. And he is now, to use your word, a hero to people all over the country, and more importantly to his hometown in Northeast Ohio.
Yeah, so there's a sophistication to this, isn't there, Ken? There's a sophistication to this, isn't there, Len, sorry? there's a sophistication to this from the young people who are watching between being a hero and being a role model.
Well, I think we have to give our fans and yourselves a lot of credit out there in terms of the amount of intensity, the amount of avidity that you have for our product and for the players and athletes that we do have. The appetite for consumption of anything and everything associated with, related to franchises, teams, players, has only gone to a whole exponential level. And again, the whole social media phenomenon has just exploded that beyond a level that I think was probably unfathomable as recently as 5, 6, 7 years ago in terms of what we see now. And it's created a higher degree of accountability because, again, there's not many places you can't go, relative to that. So I think that's created a higher degree of accountability with the player-fan franchise relationship and right or wrong, a higher standard.
Okay, let's hear from maybe 4 or 5 students now. Put your hands up if you've got a view on this as to whether you view sportsmen and women as role models. Should they be? Shouldn't they be? Does it really matter? Do you care? Do you just want to see them doing great stuff on the field of play? So hands up as microphones going around. And do tell us where you're from.
I'm Ishita from India. I completely believe that role models are very important for any sport. I mean, for women in particular, if there are role models, they'll be inspired to do better. And if there's media coverage, even better. So I think a role model would be someone who believes in his own self and has self-motivation, and someone who is able to win over the crowd. I mean, when we watch someone like Michael Phelps, I know that I'm inspired by him to reach that level. So I think that's what a role model does.
Michael Phelps is a very interesting example to give, isn't it, Ivan? Because he's got some interesting behaviors.
Yeah, and I think I absolutely agree with the student who's bringing up this point. But to go back to the point of what kind of responsibility, pressure they deal with, we also have to understand that they're young individuals who are going through the motions of life, and it takes some time to get that maturity. And the LeBron of the first era is a different LeBron now, so that needs to happen. I think the role model needs to be that. And the role model also is not only for the athletes. The role model is for everybody who works at an organization, because when you think about the Cleveland Cavaliers and everybody thinks LeBron, but when Ken travels and people don't see LeBron, it is Len who they see and they say, hey, you are the Cavaliers. And he needs to also, with his actions, spread what that role model or that behavior is. Same thing with Real Madrid. You go to China and it's the crest, it's not a particular player. So in all of our actions, we also have to do that.
Another view from one of the students.
Hi, my name is Eliana from United World College in Singapore. I wouldn't use the term obligation, but I do think that role models athletes should have a set of morals that they follow, regardless of whether they're athletes, but just as people, they need to act in a certain way that is respectful. And even if, especially being an athlete, being in media for a lot of the time, they can spread the good morals and values to everyone.
Thank you. Over there.
Thank you very much. I'm Glory Cassie from Nigeria.
Good voice.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to all the great athletes of the world, people like LeBron James. And one of my greatest models ever, Michael Jordan. As a little kid growing up, I only saw his picture just once, and that inspired me to play basketball. I watched this tape for once. I never looked back anymore. He has a charisma, uncanny instinct, that when you just come out in the building, you just see this man playing, you just love to play basketball. I mean, not just basketball, all ramifications of sport, every part of sport. I mean, he's outgoing, he's loving, he's caring. He said, I love people, I love to be outgoing. That's the word of Michael Jordan. And I think he's a great, great athlete that really inspired myself as a great player. And I'm coming up, I want to be like him someday. And I just know I'm going to meet him someday,
So you want to be like him as a basketball player or as a person as well?
As a person, he has a great character.
If I can just add to that, I think that's a great statement. But the thing about Michael, which has been very impressive, he's now ascended to the next dimension. He's actually an owner in our league and been very successful. And so he's been a great role model, even to athletes, about how you can take your success and how do you transform that from an enterprise perspective. And now Michael is a very influential owner in the very league he was playing in.
Okay, we've got a couple more. The young lady there, just in the center.
Hello, my name is Estée Lamvermeyer. I'm from Amsterdam, from the University of Applied Sciences. And I really agree with all the students we just heard, but shouldn't we also think about that athletes just do what they love, and they kind of got obligated to be a role model, they didn't, not all of them choose to be a role model, and that's a lot to ask from someone, I think.
It's a very interesting point. I mean, they're a good... Go ahead, Marc.
Well, you raise a very good point. There are some athletes who embrace being a role model, and there are others who have that stature, that status thrust upon them. If I could just take one moment, I want to tell our audience about a heroic young athlete who's had being a role model thrust upon him. He's a young football player, American football player, who played for the New Orleans Saints. He blocked one of the most famous punts in football history in the first game after Hurricane Katrina in the Superdome. And when he retired 2 years ago, he was diagnosed with ALS, one of the worst diseases that we have in this world. And he has, over the last 2 years, as he's lost the use of every muscle in his body, he has become an overarching role model and a spokesperson and a symbol for that disease. And we have a 30-second clip, if we could show it, that's a PSA that because he is such a role model, he was able to get several of his very, very famous teammates to make this PSA, and I'd like to show it to you so you can see what a role model looks like when you have that thrust upon you.
ALS doesn't just kill you, it shuts you down, little by little, bit by bit.
It starts small. Maybe it's holding a pencil that gets difficult.
Or getting up from your chair.
Then you find it hard to turn the pages of your book.
Because you can't move your fingers.
Your mind keeps working, but your body doesn't respond.
You won't see it coming because no one knows where it comes from.
Soon you can't hug your mother or pick up your child.
You won't be able to tie your shoes.
You don't need to tie your shoes because now you can't walk.
You can't eat or shave.
Or laugh or sing.
First you can't catch the ball, then you can't catch your breath.
ALS doesn't just kill you.
It steals your life, a little bit at a time.
And it doesn't stop until there's nothing left.
Unless we stop it first.
Unless we stop it now.
I'm James Gleason. Let's put our heads together and find a cure for ALS.
I think one of the things that's coming out is it's not black and white, is it? There is room, if you like, for moral ambiguity, that an athlete, a sportsman can be deeply flawed and yet have a massive impact. Casey?
Yeah, no question. It's the at that level of achievement or that level of success, there's no question that they can have an impact. Go back to Charles Barkley, I would argue he's still one of the most famous athletes in the world, and he couldn't have sort of thrown up in the face of being a role model more than anybody maybe ever. He frankly built his fame on not being a role model, and yet he's still had a big impact, and he's still actually is quite a leader in the sports industry and in his community, and it's as you said, it's complicated and nuanced for sure.
Indeed. And Mark, I mean, you've made a career out of getting people to give back, celebrities, sportsmen and women. What do you find their motivation is? What do you tap into?
Well, that's a very interesting question. It's a complicated one because there's so many motivations why people do good things. Very often it comes from the heart. In a case like Steve Gleason, it's coming from obvious need. But as Casey will tell you, being philanthropic and giving back to the community is a very important part of your brand if you're an athlete. It enhances your marketability. It's a very important part of your brand. So it's both good for that, but it's also good for your soul and good for your heart. And I would never want to go in someone's heart or brain and examine it, but I think there are many reasons why people do good, and all of them contribute in a positive way.
I mean, I can imagine you star in a Hollywood film, Casey, and the top athlete comes in and he says, set up a foundation, give $1 million, I'll get you 10 for it. No?
If only it were that easy, you know? If only it were that easy. But, you know, giving back is important, and I you know, am a believer that, you know, it's our responsibility to give back. And I think whether it's time or money or leveraging their fame, athletes can have a tremendous impact in their ability to give back to their passions. I think it's important that they do it right, which is what you spend your life doing. But they have a meaningful ability to move the needle.
This is for you, Len and Yvonne, because you've worked with and working with teams. So you've got this brand, a franchise in your case, Len, which obviously has great power to do good, and then you've got individuals who can be wayward. How do you work with that, the code of conduct you require from people who play for your team?
Well, first of all, I think we have a terrific owner in Dan Gilbert, who Dan believes in great Midwestern cities that we have in our country, and these are cities that aren't the major centers of population like a New York or LA, but great hardworking people and otherwise, and we believe that it's a contact sport as far as civic engagement, and that's a big part of who we are as an organization overall, and working in concert with our community, with Cleveland, in investing in the city development. So Dan's invested over $1 billion in downtown Cleveland, along with 12 companies, 4,000 team members working there, all since his inception and ownership of the franchise. And so those are values that are important to us, and we communicate that to our team, and we do that through engagement from a civic perspective, and just our DNA in terms of who we are and how we communicate that. And I think that was, you know, if I can ask a question, who has heard of Cleveland, Ohio out there? If I can raise a show of hands. I know it's not LA or New York. And then who has heard of LeBron James? You know, so, because I even, this has been great to be at this, Yvonne, at this conference. I've been amazed at, first of all, the number of people, certainly we haven't, Cleveland, Ohio being one, but even with LeBron, you know, a number of you have and haven't heard. But I think that's where our city was excited about, you know, LeBron is a native son of Northeast Ohio. And when you talk about values and how it emulates not just our franchise, but our market. And if I can call one slide here just to show. So he announced he was coming to Cleveland through a online posting through Sports Illustrated, "I'm coming home," which as that hit with the market, and I just want to pull out 3 quotes here, and it just speaks to values. But his relationship with the Northeast Ohio is bigger than basketball. Again, it's not just about games, it's about something bigger. That in Northeast Ohio, nothing is given, everything is earned. Speaking about our marketplace, we have to work for every single thing we get that's not handed to us. And then thirdly, this is about realizing our kids. It's not about leaving Northeast Ohio, but this is a great place to grow up. And what was really powerful, and I don't know if you've had a chance to see this, I just want to show it here briefly, but he worked with Nike in producing a segment here that spoke just to that, to our city, and wrapping our franchise into it that was incredibly powerful. I get goosebumps about it, but just want to show you that here briefly as well.
We're going to bring it on in. It's time now. It's our city. We got to do it for them, dog. We got to do it for Cleveland. They're waiting on us.
every single night, every single practice, every single game, we got to give it all we got. Because they're going to ride with us. Everything that we do on this floor, because of this city, we owe them. We're going to grind for this city. They're going to support us, man, but we got to give it all back to them. We get it done. The toughness that we have on the court is going to come from this city. Everybody, the whole city of Cleveland. That's what it's all about. It's time to bring them something special. Let's go. Bring it on in, everybody. Let's go. Let's go. Hard work on 3. Together on 6. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6. Together. Hard work on 3. Together on 6. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6. Together. Here we go, man. Hard work on 3. Together on 6. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6. Here we go, right here. Let's get it. It's all us. Cleveland on 3. 1, 2, 3.
So anyways, that sort of says it in a nutshell. But you know, ultimately, that's what I think we all aspire for.
You don't need a team talk, do you? You just play that before the start of each game. And I think, you know, I mean, fans will probably forgive a player anything except not playing for the badge.
I think so. I think yeah, this is the perfect example. For us, you know, the difference is we have an advantage, which is we're working with young athletes now who still don't think they are bigger than the organization or the institution we're trying to build with them and through them. But ultimately, there's nothing like a connection to your roots and to where you play for. This happens in Qatar when, you know, we have in the audience right now, and I'm very happy to see him here, our bronze medalist in the high jump at the London Olympics, and one of the hopeful and one of the great stars, Mutaz Barshim. And he's here because he feels connected to this place. And when he wins and where he competes, the whole country is behind him. And that happens with LeBron when he's in Cleveland because he's one of their own. Or it happens at Real Madrid or Chelsea where a home product or a homegrown player comes out through the system. They understand they play a role within that community. I would say last, because I know we're going to wrap it up soon. So again, with not everybody being of the stature of LeBron or Michael Jordan, is the little gestures that each and every one of those athletes can do. When we go to Senegal with Messi, and we went last year, and a kid has come walking 2 days to be able to see Messi, all he needs is a little smile from Messi. That's all he needs. He doesn't need him to run a foundation, give back millions to Africa projects. He just needs that smile. And that is, I think, that is a must for these guys.
What it really comes down to is being a celebrated athlete in today's world brings you wealth and fame, but being a role model brings you immortality. Two of the greatest athletes of all time in terms of role models are 2 tennis players, Arthur Ashe and Andre Agassi. And I would argue that they're greater in their roles as role models than they even were as athletes. As great an athlete as each man was, Arthur Ashe has an immortal role in race relations throughout the world, and Andre Agassi is talked about more now as a philanthropist than he even was as a tennis player.
Yeah, and Agassi,
Muhammad Ali is the third.
Yeah, and of course when he came over to England and we had to make him wear white at Wimbledon, he was like the bad boy, and yeah, it's amazing. We've got about a minute left. I'd just like to hear from a couple of the students again, just comments, observations, just very quickly. Just.
Hi everybody, I'm Hugo from PSL in France. So I just wanted to say that it's, I totally agree with what the last student said, and it's, I wanted to add that when an athlete stands up for not a a good cause like poverty or something like this, but for a political cause, most of the time he is like criticized and people just say that he doesn't have to do this. So
yeah, politics is a whole interesting thing again. I don't think we can even start on political intervention by athletes, but it is a very good point. And one more, just over, yeah, another time, another panel for next year, Richard. And it's the gentleman over there.
Hi, my name is Matthew Litke, got the University of Regina from Canada with me. And I agree that I think athletes are, in a way, obligated to be role models, but I also think that it's important that we don't over-glorify them and realize that they're still humans and that they will make mistakes and that that's okay. I mean, no one wants to see it happen, but it does happen. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you very much. And of course, the reality is we can all make a difference, can't we? Whether in a little way or a big way. A huge thank you to the panel. You've been fantastic. Please, one more time.